Hi guys, welcome back to Trail Talk. This week we have a Media Pass episode with Troy Meadow from the Midpacker pod and Mathias Eichler from Singletrack podcast and Electric Cable Car newsletter. We're going to dig into a lot of things from the media perspective on UTMB, prize money at races, athlete contracts, and a ton of other things. It's a good one. It's a long one. I really enjoyed having those guys on the show, and this is going to be like a semi-regular type of format. So stick around and enjoy. But before we get into it, I got to give a shout out to our sponsors, xmiles.co.uk, nutrition store with all of the brands that you love. So head on over there, get your TORQ, get your Morton, whatever you need. Use the code IRunOverMountains for a discount at checkout. Also, the wonderful GOREWEAR. Use the code IRunOverMountains30 for a massive 30% off at checkout as well. Best kit in the game, so check them out. But without further delay, let's get on with the show. All right, guys, back for another pod, a Trail Talk, and I think this is what we're going to be calling the Media Pass show, right? Because, hot takes from the media side. So let's get it started. Black Canyon last weekend. I'll throw a bone out and then we can run with it. No prize money once again. Mathias, what you got?
Well, I mean, to add to that, last year I wrote an article about it on Electric Cable Car that there was no prize money. And that page, I didn't write another one for this year. And that page was the most visited page this year through SEO. So people were clearly searching for it and wondering about it and
someone got paid.
themselves. Well, I mean, sort
$3.
of. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Sort of. Yes. But I mean, the point is that people are wondering about that, right? I mean, let's put it to the media side because this is a media talk, right? I mean, we don't know. It's always easy to spend Jamil's money, right? It's easy to ask them to do it. Why isn't the media asking about it? That's for me my point. Why aren't the people that are supporting and lifting up the elites and speaking on behalf of the elites and wondering how the elites are supposed to be sort of doing all of that? Why are they not raising that question with Era Wipeout?
Well, look, isn't it a case of, and maybe this is a little bit touchy with you guys being in America, but isn't it like the happy dictator analogy that, Jamil is the good steward, don't rock the boat. He seems to make good community-driven choices for the sport. And, he's a good guy. We like what he does, but he maybe gets away with not being asked hard questions because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of broke down the numbers on this, and I went on to Ultra Sign Up, and I counted. There's 1,000 people that ran the 100K. There's 570 that ran the 50K, and I know that you get cheaper if you sign up right early, but like average price is $300 for the 100K and $200 for the 50K. That's $400,000, right? And to your point, Aaron, I've built. I don't like talking about how I think other people should manage the finances in their business, and we don't know, to your point, Mathias, too, everyone likes to spend Jamil's money, right? So we don't know what it costs, operationally to run, Era Vipa. And I know that Black Canyon's a big payday for them, for sure. That there's 2 races on their docket. You guys know the 2 races, but it's got to bring in a decent amount of revenue. That's $400,000. And I have friends that throw music festivals for 10,000 plus people, and they do it for $250,000, $250,000, right? They put on a music festival. So if you can put on a music festival and pay acts to show up for $250,000, I don't know, man. They got to figure. I mean, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion over here, and the echo chamber that is the mid-pack life, you can carve out 20 or 30 grand here and slice it up. And that's that'd be a lot. I mean, you could probably get away with 10 or 15 and throw a little bone and keep everyone happy here. So I don't know. I don't know if it's to your point, Aaron, is it once you turn on the faucet, you can't turn it back off, I don't know.
Maybe that's the case. If you turn it on for one, there's prize money for how many races they have to pay out. And if you think about that collective pool of funds, it's a heap of dosh. One thing I did notice was a differentiator between Javelina and Black Canyon is this the golden ticket winners at Black Canyon are getting their entry paid for into
Mm-mm.
Western states, but the Javelina entry golden ticket doesn't come with paid entry.
From what I know, and from what I hear, they stopped paying for Black Canyon too this year. Maybe you know something I don't know.
Well, it's just from internet detective work. That's where I got that from.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm totally with both of you. I do think that the for-profit business Aravaipa has, financially speaking, no excuses to put up prize money. I don't feel like I'm the one who needs to raise that, because I don't even know if prize money overall is necessary, but I am surprised, and I'm criticizing the people that want prize money, that think that prize money is important for elites, that they're not raising it with Aravaipa. That's, for me, my main criticism. And I'm like, yeah, we always say UTMB needs prize money, but Western states can have it because they're a non-profit. But then Aravaipa gets a free pass under that, which I don't understand why they're giving them a pass.
Yeah, to your point, if any organization in North America is going to pay prize money, right? Like, I guess Aravaipa is the one with the number, because everyone says, well, like UTMB can afford to do it, right? They have 10,000 people that run races. They've got like the numbers, right? Because of the way Europe operates and the way we're restricted on public land. But like Aravaipa gets to bring a couple thousand people out to the desert to run multiple times a year. So it's not like the revenue isn't there. It's not like the revenue is not there. And I think it's interesting because Run Rabbit Run has the largest prize purse in North America. And that's all backed by sponsorship dollars. And the race director is just very keen on saying, no, we're going to keep throwing money at the pros to show up and run this race. And it's one of the few races on US soil that's been that way for, God, I mean, I want to say a decade. I'm like throwing a number out, but it's been there for that way for a long time. And they just keep doubling down. Like the prize purse just keeps getting bigger. So it can be done. That race director, I mean, I know it's also like, that's his passion project. He's not trying to he doesn't pull a dime out of that race. He doesn't make a living off of that race. So it's like, that's the apples to oranges part when you're thinking about, it's not like Jamil doesn't have a lot of mouths to feed and he's trying to put on live stream. And like, I know there's money involved in all that, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, if any organization could afford to pony up some prize money, you'd think Aravaipa could do it. So,
well, and not just could, but also should, because I mean, they are the largest organization. They're in very many areas leading and need to lead. I mean, if the pros take their races serious, they should demand the prize money from them because they are the leading outfit. I mean, essentially, you've got Western States and Hard Rock, which both get a pass because they're nonprofit, and Hard Rock's extra quirky. But beyond that, Aravaipa is it. And the fact that we don't demand it from them is, to me, really bizarre. And to your point, Aaron, I think there is something to be said about the fact that we sort of give Jamil a pass because he does so many nice things. And I think this is good in many ways, but it's also completely unfair in our media reporting. I mean, I think we should hold these organizations all to the same standards.
Yeah, and like Run Rabbit Run is also a non-profit, so balance that against Western States, it's a non-profit as well. So what's the differentiator there?
I mean, good point. I didn't even know that.
The argument I hear is like, it's not in the soul of the sport, like I hear that sometimes.
Culture, man, the culture.
Yeah, it's like, it's the culture, right? And you're just like, I don't know. I don't buy. To me, that's like tripe. It's like an excuse to just not have to do it, like my grandfather didn't do it, so I'm not going to do it, so
I feel like the culture is a good statement, but wouldn't that apply to every sport in its infancy? Like, didn't every sport at one point, not have prize money because it wasn't that professional? And then it evolved to the point that it was big enough for prize money and people were making a living out of it. So businesses are making a living out of it. Pro athletes are trying to make a living out of it. So why are we not paying the prize money for that? And also, just to your earlier point, Mathias, about, we've got sponsors now. Hoka are coming in and sponsor this event. So they're paying a chunk of money to be attached to this golden ticket event. What's that money go on?
Yeah, hopefully doping testing, right? I mean, I hear last year they didn't say anything this year and I couldn't find any update, but apparently golden ticket races are now doping controlled, right?
Yeah, there was doping control at Black Canyon this year for sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to knock on the Upstart brand, but like, what do you think it costs Satisfy to put on that, like the hoopla that they put on it? I can't remember the name of the freaking aid station, but they had they do it right? But it's like, man, it'd be cool to just, do we have to have like the crazy grandiose ridiculous aid station, or can we like slice some of that off for the athletes to get paid, right? Like I'm just like, it's interesting because the experience is always top notch at these events, right? Like Aravaipa puts on a world-class event and it takes money to do that. I understand that, but this is interesting, is like, what are the priorities,
I think the argument would be that, and we bring up Run Rabbit Run, right? I mean, the top athletes are not going there. I don't think prize money is a draw. Like, I think if somebody would put up prize money and the athletes would be saying, wait a second, we actually want prize money. They all say they want it, but in the end, nobody runs Run Rabbit Run for the prize money, right? So in some respects, you disagree?
They might. I think they might.
But I mean, Walmsley hasn't signed up for Run Rabbit Run, right?
That's because of who he is, but I think we know that other athletes that have went there and won it, some of their main motivations for it, is I wanted to do a race in August and that one has a big prize purse, so I decided to do that one.
Individuals, yeah, but it hasn't changed the perception of the race in making it a world-class event.
No, you're right. It's totally a national level, top quality national event. And it hasn't surpassed that, and it would take them to lure other competition to maybe make it that. But then there's also the fact that it's close enough to UTMB that there's a clash there. And I think we're still in a position, rightly so, that if the option is there for a race that had a prize purse and the race offered the most visibility and reach and competitiveness, the athletes will pick that because that's where the heart is, and that's where it should be.
I mean, the other side of that too is like, do you want to make $3,000 or do you want to get a pro contract that's going to support you for the next 3 years? Because like winning Run Rabbit Run it's going to put 10. It's, I think, what is it, like 8 or 10 grand that goes to the winner. Like, that's a nice paycheck, but like winning that one race isn't going to get you like a 3-year Hoka deal. Just like, but like showing up to Western States and like, running into the top 10 might actually do that for you, right? So it's just kind of like this weird, I don't know. There's a paradox that exists here, at least in North America, with like what is considered important to the elite field.
Plus, athletes will get paid a bonus just for turning up and starting UTMB, not even finishing it, not even getting the top 10. They'll get a second bonus on top of that as well. So UTMB is altogether way more lucrative than that. So I think we're maybe done on the prize money thing, unless anyone else has something to add on that.
No, like, all I can say is like Aravaipa puts on a world-class event, and I think that's the only thing that's really missing is like, how do we figure out how to incentivize the pros? I mean, they're already incentivized to be there, but how do we compensate them for showing up? So
maybe the PTRA should be speaking to Jamil.
I mean, so far, the PTRA has only existed to speak to UTMB, right? They haven't really made a statement about any other race or organization or event. So,
yeah, the PTRA feels like it's a European-based organization with a lot of American members. I don't think they've had any activism in the States that I've heard of.
That's kind of, it's kind of like Mathias, right? He's like the European based in America that's always trying to like big up UTMB and that kind of thing. So
he's more niche than that. He's way more niche than that. Okay, guys, let's move it on. No. You've got other hot takes. You can come back. Tarawera, 4,000 runners, big event. One of the, probably the second biggest event in the Southern Hemisphere, alongside Ultra Trail Australia and Ultra Trail Cape Town. 70% new runners at this event this year, which is massive kind of churn. Oh, is it churn? Like, because there was 4,000 runners there last year, but it's 70% new this year. So I find that interesting. But maybe something that we can focus on for a little bit is the gender split, which is the best that I've kind of seen. 52% male and 48% female entrants. Now, from your blog post last year, Mathias, on electric cable car, we know that that's kind of a similar number to the gender split of the finishers last year's race, but we don't know that yet. I reached out to UTMB and got a breakdown on distance because, well, we kind of know the trends of the way this works. So I'll just go through some of this. 21k, 50k, 100k, and then the miler. So it's 60-40, male-female in the 21. It's 49-51 DK. It's 35-65k, and it's 28-72. I'm sorry, other way around. That's female-male. So that is the trend that we've seen a lot of the time. The women will maybe tend to not go on the longer or the most technical of the races, but all the same, that's an amazing split. Mathias, why don't you kick us off?
So let me start with the churn. We had Chrissy Fabo came in second in the miler last year, I believe, or very top. I don't know 100%. She's German living in New Zealand. I had her on a podcast and she was saying that last year it was a big shit show. It was one of those UTMB events that ran out of water and there was a lot of frustration, and it is still managed by the original race director. And I think he had to make lots of course changes, and this year I think it's the first course change that goes back to sort of the original route. And so it could be the combination of last year's frustration and then actually going back to the original courses that brought a lot of people that perhaps the last couple of years didn't run or got sick of last time, new people or people wanting to come back. So I think that could play into this a little bit of why we see so many new runners. Or it's just that Tarawera is a big bucket list race, right? One of those sort of like you once in your lifetime you go to New Zealand and you run a race, and so it will always have a really large number of first timers.
I mean, going to the churn part, and I mean, I was going to mention it's like traveling to New Zealand and racing sounds like fun in February, right? Like I hear it's really nice over there. So but at the same time, like if you're going to make that trip, unless you're going solo, like if you have a partner and you're bringing the whole family, doesn't it make sense that everyone gets involved in the event, right? So it's interesting that like you have 70% new runners. I bet the 90% of those people are like traveling from out of town to come to New Zealand to experience the event, to experience New Zealand, and everyone's finding something that they can enjoy because of the distances that you can run, right? So I mean, I guess my one hot take is like what's in the water down under, but like the fact that you said it's 70% churn definitely leads me to believe that it's like that whole bucket list thing. It's like, so I don't know, whatever, like dad's gonna run the 100K, mom's gonna run the 50K, and they're gonna take turns taking care of the kids, or vice versa, I guess is like the way I like saw it in my head when I started thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd like to be in New Zealand running right now. It's cold in Nashville, so.
I spent some time to the gender split. I spent some time last year covering the results of almost every single UTMB event. I missed a couple over the summer when there were just too many stacked on top of each other. And I was surprised that looking at the gender split globally, it looked much better, especially if we sort of break it down and sort of mush it all together, right? When we are not just looking at a 100-mile distance, but actually taking the shorter distances into consideration, right? That overall, it looked actually much better. So this idea that women aren't racing, I think it's certainly true in the top events, in the longest distances, that we still have a huge disparity. But I think overarchingly, the percentages are much better than we are sort of led to believe when it comes to looking at the full event that UTMB puts on across globe.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. And the 4,000 runner figure for me it's a big number. It's the second year that it's hit just over the 4,000. And somebody reached out to me and was saying about UTA, Ultra Trail Australia, is actually a larger event. They've just added the miler this coming year, which I think will add another 450 runners, I think, to the entries. I'm just blown away that we're getting events that are that size and it's just like a regular UTMB event. I think that's shows that how the sport is really growing. And if you look at you scroll down through and see the nations that are represented, there are a lot of people traveling here. That's not the intention of having these World Series events around the world, but it also feels to me like I felt like I went through maybe 4 or 5 years of trying to be very thoughtful about what races I would think about traveling to, and maybe just having one flyaway big race and then focusing more on ones that I could drive to. Okay, you're in Europe, you can drive to plenty or whatever, but I feel like we're maybe coming into an era or at the start of another era where it's kind of like, fuck this shit. I'm flying to a race because I want to do that race. What are your thoughts on the environmental impact and people actually thinking about traveling again?
I mean, I will just say, like, I'm trying to figure it out, but I'm probably going to have to fly to a race this year. And I haven't done that. And I mean, I did it last year, and that was because Hurricane Helene just like, yeah, there was just a lot going on because I was like doing the Javelina live stream. I couldn't race because the races were canceled locally that I was going to race. And then I just happened to get a bib to the Fall Classic in California. And I was like, cool, I guess I'm flying to a race. It's the first time I've done that. And then this year, it's the same because I need a Hard Rock qualifier, and I'm not going to get it locally because I didn't make it into the local race here that actually is a Hard Rock qualifier. And so, like, I think it just comes down to, like, it's like circumstantial, right? Like, I've lived a lot, like, similar to what you were saying, Aaron. Like, when I lived in California, I just drove to races. There's like plenty of great races to go run in California, and like that was great. It's like, and then in North Carolina, you know, on the East Coast, so like there's decent races to go and run. And we have some really awesome races here in Western North Carolina, and I'm excited to kind of get into more and experience more of those local races. But then I'm on that like never-ending quest of tickets into lotteries, and you know, this is the year I have to run a hard 100. So yeah, it's, you know, it's kind of, I think it comes down to like the organizations can say all they want that they want to minimize the environmental footprint, but when you have, you know, when you have a lot of destination races, people are gonna travel to them. It's just kind of how it is, you know. Like, you're not gonna stop Americans from wanting to like get their stones and qualify and go to Chamonix, you know. Like, that's gonna happen like constantly. And same with same with like domestically too. Like, there's only so many races on the list for Hard Rock. There's only so many races on the list for Western states, and if you're on that journey, you're likely going to have to travel because it takes, you know, whatever, call it 8 to 12 years to get into those two races, right? And so it's like, are you going to run the same 100 miler or 100K that's local to you for 8 years just so you can get a ticket into Western states? No, like that, I'm not. You know what I mean? That doesn't seem like fun to me, you know? So yeah, I mean, I guess to my point, like, that's like my personal take on it. But, you know, I think people are ready to travel. I think people are ready to experience the world again. So,
Matthias, before you jump in, I just need to say one thing. Troy, good on you for reminding us that you were on the media for Javelina last year.
it
So
was
were
fun.
you biting your lip whenever we're talking about giving Jamil a hard time about
No,
not playing? I mean, are you going to lose your pass this year?
no, no,
Or
like
are you the guy that needs to ask the question?
well, I mean, I get like, man, let's flip a coin there, right? Like, I met Jamil, you know, he's a busy dude. He just comes off as like super genuine, like heart of the sport, right? Like, what the persona that he puts out was at least the persona I saw on day 3 of Javelina when he's winding up cables. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's just doing like what needs to get done, and he was super approachable, right? Like, but at the same time, like, yeah, man, I mean, it's like, I don't know, dude. Like, you gotta they give a lot, and it's hard. Like, to Mathias's point, we keep asking them to give more, and it's just like, well, you know what, I'll you know, I guess, you know, they'll give when they're good damn ready to give, I guess. I don't know, you know. Like, I enjoyed my experience on the live stream. I'll go back, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I'm not like beholden to Mountain Outpost, you know what I mean? So
Is that a paid position?
my travel was paid for 100%, and it was perfect because I needed to get out of it. Was like the way it lined up for me, I was like, I would do it again, but like it was kind of perfect, man, because like my hometown was destroyed. So like to be able to have an excuse to leave for 2+ weeks and have basically like the majority of my travel paid for and covered was it was pretty cool, honestly. So yeah.
All right, Matthias, wrap us up on Tarawera and the numbers.
So going to the whole flying and environmental aspect, let me flex my electric cable car muscles. I think the whole idea that we shouldn't fly and we should be environmentally sensitive, which was much more prevalent in Europe than it ever was in North America, partly because the environmental focus has always been far less prevalent here in the US than it was in Europe. And partially because it's a lot harder to not fly because the distances are just so massive and there's no public transportation alternative that you can take, right? If you're not flying, you are driving for 3 days, right? That doesn't feel great either. I think that attention to especially the flying piece, I think got in many ways destroyed by COVID because we were cooped up for a long time. And I think COVID sort of reset this a little bit, and I think there's a lot more I need to live my life because life is short, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow mentality. And I think people sort of therefore have lost a little bit that focus on that collaborative effort on trying to sort of fix climate change. Seeing then also, and it's now I'm going to get a little bit political, right? But I mean, seeing the billionaires flying their private jets everywhere and saying, do I need to really take a paper straw instead of a plastic straw if Elon Musk literally every time he takes a dump flies to another place, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of fatigue in our society because we didn't get anywhere with our efforts in trying to sort of stem ourselves against the threat of climate change, right? And so I think there is very much sort of a sort of fuck it, I need to live my life mentality. And I think that UTMB probably use the idea of, hey, we're bringing races locally so you don't have to travel, because the European organization, that seemed like a reasonable environmental piece to say. But in the end, I think they're happy if you travel from wherever and sign up for their races, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not their leading objective, but it kind of looks good for the marketing piece on the green credentials. Just since you've mentioned it, I actually think some of the desire to be more environmentally friendly as trail runners came from Killian and people that are now, will not say all the names, but who are now kind of green runners, who were very vocal about that. And they would only travel to one race, they would try and do it by train, this type of thing. And I think if you look at all of the other ways that Killian has influenced the sport, I think his Salomon era days when he spoke about things like this very much impacted how I was thinking at the time. And I would say it's one of the reasons why I was trying to fly less. So yeah, I didn't think about that until you brought it up. But yeah, it's a good point.
I want to add I tried to create a business around making events carbon neutral, like focused on trail running events carbon neutral, did a bunch of data research, had a meeting with, an organization that does a lot of signups for races. And when I talked to one of the owners there, basically what I was told is like, there's not really an appetite to mandate this across every single, to like put that onus on every single runner, because when they did their data, they had opt-ins, and the amount of money people were willing to opt in to donate was like, so like, it was like $1, like, oh yeah, sure, I'll donate $1, and that was just like like, if you care, you can donate, right? And I think that's where like we are socially, societally, is like, it's on the individual to make the decision that they want to make, right? And like, if you feel like flying to a race, I can share a half a dozen websites where you can pay for carbon capture, and you can actually pay to remove the carbon of your flight. It's not that difficult these days. There are legit organizations doing stuff like that. I mean, some of it's real and some of it's not. You have to vet this stuff, but like, who's going to do that, right? Like, are you going to say, oh, cool, like pay an extra $50 to remove the 2 tons of carbon that I just like released into the atmosphere because I flew on a flight for 12 hours?
Yeah, but all of
Right
that
now
stuff's
it's
a
on.
load of bullshit. That's been like debunked. That the majority of it is, it's worse than greenwashing. It's like it's lies. A lot of that.
There are some companies that are legit. You have to fish through the fodder for sure. But yeah, I mean, my point is that like right now, it's about what the individual wants to do, because no one's willing to take, even at like a really grassroots level, no one wants to take a stance. And like, if they're not doing it, to Mathias's point, like if they're not going to make changes from the top down, like it has to be on the individual. And at the end of the day, the individual is going to do what's easiest and best for them. Most people aren't willing to do, I mean, we're all willing to do hard things, but for some reason, when it comes down to like doing the right thing for the planet 100% of the time, that's just not feasible. You have to really take, to your point with Killian, it's like, and the green runners, like they really took an 80-20 approach to it, right? They're like, we're going to run a lot of local races, but we're still going to go out there and fly to one big race because you kind of have to. So
I mean, to kind of move this along a little bit, there is something super, super fascinating to see each country's trail running culture and how it is sort of grown out of something. Like you can look at French trail running and you can see sort of that aspect of professionalism and close ties to real companies making real products. And you can look at, for me, I find a lot of what I see from the Great Britain area, there's a lot of focus around local running and environmental running. And there is sort of an interesting focus that I see coming from that has always been part of the conversation. And I think, US has its own focus around sort of this whole idea of grassroots and stuff. And I think there is something to be said where every culture develops trail running on its own. We all come together, run the same races and compete the same distances, but we are sort of very much interpreting what it means, and it's a reflection of where the culture is currently at, and it's a reflection where the sport is at. And I think that speaks a lot to how it develops and grows. And there's just different focus and different kind of worldviews behind that.
Yeah, I always remember, I don't think it's as, maybe it might look better from the outside looking at the UK and the Irish scene, but as much as it's ever been a case, it's just been, can we carpool to the race, because it's at this trailhead, it's at this farmer's field, and there's no parking. It's not really ever been because we want to cut down on CO2 emissions from these 50 people that are running a fell race.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the secondary thing that some people may have thought, but it's not forefront in the mind in the UK and Ireland either. Yeah. Although maybe culturally, maybe the percentage of people might think of it more, but I don't think as your average trail, mountain, off-road runner, whatever category you want to give it, thinks too differently in America than they do in Europe. All right, let's move it on. Outside Magazine, they announced some layoffs. What on earth? I mean, it's not even Outside Magazine anymore. It's not even a magazine. What the hell is going on with this organization? As long as I've ever been following Outside, which hasn't been that long, to be honest, but let me just jump back to maybe like 2021, 2022, whenever I started to remember them acquiring things. And I was living in the States at the time. They acquired Gaia, and I was like, oh no, this is my favorite offline, free to use app. Needs no data, needs no signal, gets you out of a difficult situation potentially. And they bought it and they wrapped their login into it. So I purchased the Outside Plus or whatever it was called. And it was just an absolute shit show. Then whenever I moved back to Europe, I still had to pay to get access to the Gaia Premium or whatever it was called. but I couldn't get access to the outside magazine parts because they were ring fenced inside the US. And it was just like, grab this tech, put it inside this, under this umbrella, and not really connected up properly. And I just don't like anything that they've done. But they seem to be moving away from this whole magazine side and journalism piece. So let's have a chat about that. And Mathias, you kick us off, because I know you had Alex Bond on the original Singletrack podcast maybe just a week ago, and that was a great listen. So I'd recommend listeners of this show to go and listen to that one as well. But why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yes, thank you. Troy, do you know the big history of Outside and how the whole acquisition came to be?
I remember reading the magazine 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I to be honest with you, like I'm kind of familiar with what happened and the amount of things that have been rolled up under Outside, but like Outside's, in my opinion, it's been particularly irrelevant to me for probably the last like 6 or 7 years, because
So Outside has for decades been the premier outdoor magazine in the US, has broken many of the top stories, has made careers. John Krakauer's infamous famous Into Thin Air was a assignment from Outside, where he went to Mount Everest and was part of an expedition where 15 people died on the mountain, and IMAX film was made about around the same time and stuff. And so Outside has been an absolute pivotal piece, almost like National Geographic magazine. It was one of the absolute top magazines. And I think Robin Thurston has made lots of money in the tech world. And like we're seeing right now, once you've made money in the tech world, number one, you have lots of funny money to play with. And number one, you also have sort of this idea that you can just replicate this in any other like medium. You can just waltz right in and techify another like genre of business. And so he took advantage of the opportunity that essentially Outside was struggling, because every magazine is struggling. Magazines here in the US completely beleaguered and are folding left and right, are trying to all become sort of more and more watered down in the hope that they can be appealing to more people, than while in the process essentially losing their core audience. And so he took advantage of that moment in time and bought Outside, and bought, I don't know, over a dozen other publications that are all outdoor related. Tried to roll it all into one, and increasingly what became clear is that he was never interested in the magazine, in the media business, right? He was interested in the email addresses and the people connected to the various businesses that he was buying, because he was trying to build an now it's called Outside Interactive Inc. or whatever, but he was trying to build a media business. That move in itself is not necessarily bad, but literally every rollout of anything new that he's done over the last few years have not just been bad, it's also awful timing. Like really, really completely, there's a really famous saying here in North America, you skate to where the puck is going to be, right? Wayne Gretzky, the great ice hockey player from the great North, said, right, you don't skate where the puck was, but where the puck is going to be. And he basically launched NFTs, not just where NFTs, a complete bullshit idea, but he also launched it when everybody had already seen through it. Like there was nobody buying it. If there was a really, really short window when some of the brands,
I made a killing on my Outside NFTs. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right. No, I mean, like it's one thing to say, we're going to do NFTs, right? But there was a short window when Ferrari and some of these like, Gucci brands were like launching NFTs and stuff. He waited so long where literally everybody knew NFTs were complete bullshit. And then it's like, guess what? We have an Outerverse and you can buy NFTs. I'm like, and anyway, this was number one. And then he just recently, like last year, he launched a news feed thing. So now Outside Interactive looks like Facebook. And I'm like, nobody's on Facebook anymore. And people are completely fatigued with the idea of social media.
The infinite scroll is dead, right?
The infinite scroll is dead. Politics has completely poisoned this sort of marketplace of idea, and let's gather with our best friends and share links and thoughts and stuff like that, right? And then he launches this newsfeed thing. I'm like, you were like 5 years too late. Like, what is... Anyway, bad ideas with really, really bad timing, and all the while laying off constantly editors and people who are actually working, producing content and producing great stories and writing and doing important work that would constitute something that is a magazine. And in the same week where he lays off editorial staff, he buys another tech company that is now a booking engine. And I'm like, so clearly the money is still flowing, but the idea that some of money that outside that great brand, it used to be one of the most important magazines, would exist as a magazine is just dead, right? They're done.
The idea that this guy can pull together what they've got and make the outside's version of a Strava and an Instagram and have it a success is absolute lunacy. There's not a hope in hell. The best thing that they could do with some of those products would be to disconnect them from outside. Like Gaia, all Gaia needs is, I think Strava should license their heat map data, anonymous heat map data, and sell that to various mapping software. And if Gaia had Strava's heat map data, I would pay $100 a year for that alone. Strava's not great at mapping. Gaia's great at mapping. Strava has the heat map data. But back to the outside thing, like who wants to combine yes, nobody wants another social media, but also nobody wants one that's cobbled together with bits and pieces that kind of are loosely connected or connected by centralized accounting and HR.
Well, I want to talk about the acquisition though. It's Intopia. Intopia, is that am I saying that correctly? So the idea, and this is just like, it's just interesting because it's an acquisition, right? What usually happens in business when you have an acquisition, you restructure. And when you restructure, you let people go, right? It's like a class. This literally is just like very
centralized
classic.
Key services.
Yeah, it's
get
just very
rid of HR and accounts.
Yeah, it's very classic, right? And then, but the thing is like Robin has been on the record saying he wants to take the company public in 3 years. So like he's like, they're going to keep leaning this thing out. Like at this point, they're on a 3-year track to try to create liquidity for him and the investors that have been backing his play while they can. And then at the end of the day, like what you're going to get left with is like some really, for lack of a shitty IPO that may or may not like come to fruition. But like I see like the whole bringing a booking agency in, and what I read, I like read this article, and it's like, we write an article, like their reference was like, hey, we'll write an article about like the best 5 ski resorts in North America to go to, but then that's it. We'll leave you to figure the rest of it out. So now like that vision is like, oh, well now like you can just book right off the article. And
no one does that.
No one does
Nobody
that.
wants to do that.
I understand that. No one wants to do that. But like, that's the whole point, right? So what's going to happen is like, he's creating the song to sell. And what he's creating is this thing that like, when you map it out on paper, and if you can like create certain revenue numbers out of these individual pieces and kind of conglomerate together, you're like, oh, well, this is the market cap. And this is what it's like. This is just really about telling a story to the market, so the market will try to leverage these assets for him when he's ready to go public. And that's like, all of this is just like it's sad because what it's done is taken something that is quintessential, was quintessential, and like kind of dumbed it all down, to your point, Mathias. And like, I think what's interesting, and I'll get off my soapbox here, is like, you have organizations like print isn't dead. There's just riches and niches. And like, what he's doing is like trying to create something for everyone. So of course you have something for nothing. And like, at the end of the day, like you just keep bolting. Once you start the M&A thing and the acquisition thing, you just keep bolting things on until you have this like Frankenstein that on paper has a lot of value. But like, I don't want to like, it's a whole other side of the coin, but like the wind, is doing very exceptional things in print media, but they have like a specific model they lean into. It's just 100% subscription. They're literally they're doing the playbook of print from 30 years ago, and they're like, obviously they're not going to IPO. They're not going to ever be worth billions of dollars, but they're having a lot of fun doing it and creating livelihood for a handful of people while they do it, right? So it's like this interesting thing of like, where are you bringing the value? Where are you adding the value? Like in this situation, it's just like, to your point, it's like some tech narcissist megalomaniac trying to like create the Frankenstein of the publication world, you know? So
Yeah, so like they've spent years destroying the magazine business, but look at Iron Far. It was acquired. They continue to write pieces and exist still as a reputable news source. You look at print media that's gone through a renaissance. I'm not sure anyone is making big retirement out of it, but I'll name just a few, like Mental Athletic. Although they probably don't make big money, they have a lot of, they're high on vibes. The brands love them. I speak to some cool brands and they're like, who are the people behind Mental Athletic? Because the shit that they're doing is fire. You know, this type of stuff. Like the Wind, as you say, they have started, and actually, like, I think just over 10 years in existence now. I remember going to their launch party in Chamonix at UTMB in 2015, so actually it'd be coming up in 10 years. They've started, and now they've been on this 2-year push to expand into the US, and they've really grown a magazine, a print publication that is still maintained this kind of community feel, even though it's now global. So I love what they're doing. Again, they're not making a ton of money, I wouldn't have thought either. Mountain Gazette, so maybe somebody could talk on that. It's not a magazine I've ever read myself, but I know, you know, we've heard of it on the Free Trail podcast. Fell Runner in the UK is an absolutely amazing magazine. It's about the same size and quality of Like the Wind, but if you sort of take Like the Wind and combine it with Ultra Runner magazine, that's like what Fell Runner is in the UK. So it's still got like that calendar and things, but it's got these great write-ups on maybe not just races, but iconic people in the sport or stories and things like this. And then obviously we come back full circle and we're back to ultrarunning.com and Jamil Corey. So the magazine business could exist. It could exist and add credibility to the outside brand, but it's gone now. Mathias.
I think this is the sad part, right? We were just spending Jamil's money earlier today. Now we're spending Robin Thurston's money, right? It's difficult to see what really is going on, right? The sad part is that he seems to not care about the value that the magazine used to have. Like he needed to buy all of these properties, and Outside is only one of them that he sort of is destroying. There were so many other in-print magazines that were shit canned in the process, valuable brands that people really, really loved in the particular niches. And the bummer is that whatever vision, whatever IPO roadmap that he is on, that he somehow had to do it while destroying all these magazines. That's really the sad part, because he could have done this in another way. Yeah, he needed the, user data and stuff like that. Get that part, but that he doesn't have the foresight. If we say that Mountain Gazette and Like the Wind are these premium magazines that hold so much value and love in our hearts for those properties, why can't he say, I'm going to do all of this NFT bullshit and all of this stuff on one side, but I'm going to keep a really, really special silo in one corner where I'm building the absolute best outdoor magazine in the world. And it can't be that expensive, because Like the Wind can do it. So Outside can do it too if they wanted to, right? And they, with their reach into ski resorts, this company that they just acquired, right, does booking for many of the big ski resorts and stuff like that, right? So they easily could have a high class, or perhaps matte, because that's cooler, magazine at literally every Airbnb in one of those ski resorts, right? They would have circulation out the wazoo if they would try to create a high quality magazine, but apparently that's not on the roadmap at all, right?
Well, we'll see, because like supposedly in the summer is when this new iteration of Outside's workforce on the the magazine isn't dead. They're going to keep putting it out. It's not like going away. They're just like, they've been like, they just got rid of 20 employees that work on they just got rid of 20 employees. A portion of those people worked on the magazine. I think so. The interesting thing that I dug out of this article that I read was that the new GM of Outside is going to be this individual, and they worked for Dash Meredith, which is basically like this huge print juggernaut that prints like People, Better Housekeeping, Southern Living. So like it's a lifestyle focused print periodical, and like I'm interested to see what's going to happen now, because like does that actually is that going to be better for Outside to have that like kind of new blood come in to run like kind of oversee editorial across all of their print assets, or does Outside just look like Better Homes and Gardening, like at the end of the day? Like, I mean, it's interesting because like I said, like I loved reading Outside magazine like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Like I just can't. Yeah. I just can't.
So basically
now,
they do.
So.
So we now wait until the summer, and then they do just like what they did with the NFT and the news feed. They release it when they've literally pissed off everyone, and everyone has abandoned them. And then they're saying, look, but look, we have now a cool magazine. Now you should subscribe. Well, now people are pissed. Now nobody's going to subscribe anymore. Like trying to get the goodwill back after they've made so many disastrous decisions and laid off so many people. And I mean, they pissed off the community. That was unnecessary.
I don't disagree there. I think it's like I said, it's irrelevant to me now, but like hearing, just like I've seen it over the last like 5 or 6 years, like just the fun comical decision making that's going on. But yeah. I mean, I think if you asked Robin Thirst, he would say I saved all those magazines because they were all going to go out of business unless I bought them. To your point of
every tech millionaire sees themselves as the savior for everything, right?
Okay, moving on, guys. I've heard enough. UTMB calendar is finalized for 2025. 9 new events, global spread. Let me read out some of these events. We have the TORQ Nutrition, which has happened. We have Grand Raid. Actually, I'm not going to read all out the events. We have UK, we have France, Italy, Turkey, 2 in China, Japan, Chile, and Mexico. So a good spread of global events there. 50 events worldwide. Seems like a nice number, almost one a week if you average it all out. Do we think that this is a settling number for a while? What's the general consensus? Mathias, you go ahead.
I think so. I think this is the first year that they announced a calendar in sort of a finished fashion. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of settling in and saying, let's pull back a little bit on any new acquisitions. Let's really let the ones that we have fill up, overfill, whatever, raise entry fees, whatever, try to turn them into profitability before we are acquiring more events. So it feels sort of final for the year. Having said this, if they would be final, what's the press announcements going to be around key dates? They've always sort of paired event announcements and big sponsor announcements during key weeks, like Canyons, and when it was a major, I don't know how this changed, but definitely sort of in those 2 weeks leading up to UTMB press often pumped out, hey, this is what we're doing next. Hey, this is what we're doing next. And so if the calendar would be final, what else they would be talking about? But it feels like that's what they're settled on for now.
They can't. We've had a couple of years, more than a couple of years, and basically the blame game has been, well, these are growing pains. Let's cut them a little bit of slack. Growing pains can't go on forever. So maybe we're coming into a more settled period. But personally, I don't think it's the end of the acquisition game. Mm-hmm. Troy, what are you thinking on this?
I mean, at some point you got to start the investment has to start to pay off, right? And I'm not saying it doesn't already, but like to Mathias's point is like, actually going back to the Outside thing, like how many acquisitions are you going to do? Like, what do you need? Like how many acquisitions do you need in order to create success, right? Like 50 races, That's a lot to deal
The
with.
events.
Probably at least 3 races, right? So call it 150 to probably 180 events, right? Because they keep adding these miles. Like, I don't know why any ultra runner would show up and run a mile, but like, hey, like, I guess it's doing good for them, right?
A mile?
No.
So you guys
Down under, the miler is the 100-mile event. They call him the miler.
My bad. I'm a dumb American over here.
I'm
so,
championing this term. I think that's what we should call 100 milers.
The miler.
So I just call it a miler now. I'm down with that.
I'll take that. I'll take that with me here. I'll start spreading the gospel here in the United States of America. It's now the miler. Got it. Yeah, I don't, man. There's a lot going on. I'm interested to see. Like, I like to follow the drama, but I'm not like, I'm not just like too inundated in it. I think it's interesting because, like, obviously they have Western States here on their list. It's the only event that doesn't say by UTMB, obviously, because there was a whole shtick about that last year. Yeah, exactly. Like, they wish. Like, from an American standpoint, I just, I like put this thing out last year, and I think there's a new event coming. There's a new 50K coming in that's getting put on. I don't think UTMB is putting on, but they're putting on at a ski resort. And that was what I thought was going to happen in America, was like UTMB is just going to partner with Vail, and they're going to take the Whistler thing, and they're just going to they're going to have Colorado events. They're going to have California events. They're just going to blow up using those properties because it's an easy way to get a bunch of people, because it's not, the land use issues don't exist at a ski resort. You can have, if you want to have say what?
There are not enough trails and ski resorts.
Yeah,
the ski resorts aren't big enough.
That's why the 50K is the only thing that you kind of see happening. But like, that was kind of my prognostication. I didn't say that word right, but that's what I thought that UTMB was going to do. That was like the model they were going to try. And I was happy to say that they haven't really. They have 5 events here in the US. They can have those events. I've ran Grindstone prior to the acquisition. I ran Grindstone the year of the acquisition, and it was a completely different event. They put on a good show, and I can see why people really like it. I don't know if, to your point, I'm not traveling to go to a UTMB event anytime soon. That's for sure.
I think they have to be really thoughtful about how they expand in North America. And in the new races, we don't see any other than this Mexico race. So I think that's a good growth opportunity for them, is more events in Mexico, because essentially it's a cheap holiday destination for American travelers, right? I mean, it's a simple flight. It's the same time zone. But if I can maybe speak a little bit on more local knowledge for me, if we think back a year, maybe just over a year ago, I can't remember where I heard it, but there was talk that there would be 2 to 3 more events in the kind of the broader North European UK scene. And we've only seen one of those acquisitions, the TORQ Nutrition, which had its first race. So there's at least one other race that's coming. I think the Kerryway Ultra in Ireland was approached. There's also, I've heard rumours that the Ben Nevis Ultra in Scotland, which is a 100-miler, which was actually the 100-mile event as part of the Skyline Scotland race that used to be on the Golden Trail and the Sky Running before that. And that's owned by Shane Ulray, who also organises, the organiser behind the Dragon's Back. So I've heard that the Ben Nevis 100 is one that they're interested in. And then in the Lake District, I believe they approached the Lakeland 100, which is a massive community event, very big trail event in the Lake District. And remember, this is a fell running region, not trail running per se, but it's very well thought of. And they've said no. The other event, which is more in the outskirts of the Lake District, it might even be in the Peak District, I'm not quite sure. It's actually, I think it's in the southern Lake District, is the 13 Valleys. And it has all of the race distances already. It might have a 20, but it's 50, 100K, 100 mile. It's got 3-4 distant events. Doesn't go over peaks, but it has the distances, it has the vert. It already has the ready to co-brand or stick a by UTMB tagline onto the name. So I think that might be the most likely event that we see dropping in the UK, and we would expect to maybe hear an announcement on that at some point this year, if that went ahead. So, Matthias, any thoughts on that?
So I think we were talking about acquisition a lot. I think the important part also to remember is that UTMB isn't very transparent about which races they actually own and which they don't. Like they have at least 3 or 4 different models, right? There are in Europe races that the UTMB organization owns outright. They are races in Australia, New Zealand, and in North America, I think are owned by Ironman. And right. And then there are a whole bunch of partnerships, especially in more remote areas where neither Ironman or UTMB has a reach. They sort of partner with sort of on a franchise model. And I think last year there were several events that didn't really go that well. Want to say, I wonder if they got I don't want to say spooked, but they've reconsidered in how they're partnering with locals, because ultimately they are trying to make money. And so there are some expectations around how much money flows back to UTMB and Ironman by slapping the labels on it. And I think that there were several events where the race organization was just saying, this doesn't work for us anymore, right? I mean, it's great that you send us the banners, but if you expect that level of profits out of it or that percent of cut, we can't run an event. And so I think these sort of more far-reaching partnerships UTMB is sort of reconsidering, right? In South America, they're sort of struggling a little bit in trying to find the right kind of partnership. I think it's an event in Chile that was just put on hold after they had already the race registration open, and I don't think it's reopened yet. And then the Puerto Vallarta in Mexico is getting moved, and therefore is not happening in 2025. It's going to get moved to a completely different part of the calendar. And so I think the Argentina one's also moved locations and stuff. And so I think that there's a lot of actual turmoil among these event locations, and I don't think in the end, we don't see this, and UTMB can say, well, we still want that because we allow people to get stones in other parts of the world, which I think is important and valuable. But I think all of the turmoil prevents them from making money, right? I mean, they're not doing this as a charity. They want the cut of these events. And so I think they're reconsidering a little bit how they partner, right? For Mauritius, I think was like a 1-year event, and then it was pulled back, and Mallorca had issues. And then one of the Canary Island races also disappeared off of the calendar, right? I think that there's a lot of turmoil that doesn't help them establish a good business case, right? And so I think they're trying to pull back a little bit from that.
Yeah, I think some of the deals that they do are 2-3 years at best before there's a renegotiation. And the likes, I think you're mentioning Transvolcania, which is now gone back to being independent, which I think was a great move for them. That they weren't happy with the input that UTMB had, and it's already they didn't need UTMB to boost their event. It was already a really highly thought of race, very credible, that attracted athletes and sponsors. So to be honest, I'd be more questioning, I wonder why they went the by UTMB route for the 2 or 3 years. And then touching on the Mallorca race by UTMB, that was a really strange one. And also maybe bad luck for them as well. You know, the race, the first race last year, was at mid-October, hit with that sort of freak weather, and they basically had to cancel all of the races. And then within 2 weeks, we saw the original event organizer, who was, let's just call it the Mallorca 5,000, which was the original event that UTMB then added the other distances around to make it a by UTMB event. They announced that this year, they will be back to their a non-by UTMB event. So I reached out to them at the time and had a conversation with them, and they're like, yeah, the Mallorca 5,000 race will be a standalone event going back to our original date, and the by UTMB event will be whatever it will be. But there was this sort of feeling that they moved our race to a date and then they got hit by bad weather, and that's on them.
Mhm.
So you're right. Like, I would love to have a bit more transparency on what, maybe it's more of a business conversation and viewers maybe aren't that interested, but I would love to know what these races, are they franchises, are they wholly owned, or are they on 2-3 year contracts? You touched on the Southern Hemisphere races. Ultra Trail Australia was actually the first Ironman event, and it's fully owned by Ironman. But I think Tarawera is a different model altogether. I don't believe it's owned by Ironman. I don't know if it was totally bought out or whatever, but yeah, I would love a bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, for us as sort of fans of sort of UTMB as a thing, it would be interesting if we could see even if there would be a special label. So this isn't actually UTMB owned event, right?
By
but
UTMB asterisks.
Yeah, exactly. But Starbucks doesn't do that either, right? I mean, at Starbucks, you walk into a Starbucks, you don't know who owns the Starbucks, right? In the end, even though they have lots of different licensing agreements, right? And they purposely don't do that. You're supposed to think it's all a UTMB event, even though, it's not.
Mathias, let's get Troy to say something, because it's like 10:30 or maybe 11 o'clock in North Carolina. So, Troy, we don't want you to fall asleep. Please pitch in.
Well, I'm just over here like trying to navigate the UTMB website, and it's like I'm like, what happened? What is going on here? But I was just like looking at the Mallorca event. It says it's sold out. It says it's full
for 24.
No, I mean for 2025, maybe they just haven't reset it or they haven't opened registration yet. But I'm like, gosh, they definitely don't have a problem selling the race out. Like if that's the case.
Mallorca was a brilliant race for Europeans because it's super cheap to fly to Mallorca, and Europeans thought this was the javelina from a North American point of view, where a lot of people think, hey, one more season closer in an area where it's warm. And Mallorca was that. Europeans loved when UTMB launched Mallorca.
Yeah, it's October, November. It does say more information coming soon, get notified. So actually they haven't opened registration yet. That's what's going on. But
it was
to your point, let's go ahead. What?
It was you. You're getting sleepy.
But to your point though, like if they are full, I mean, gosh, they were sold out. It's like, why do you need you? It's like this whole like kind of this like cart for the horse situation, right? Like maybe some races feel like they need it to do the draw. Like South America isn't really attractive to me because like I don't know if I want to go spend that much time in a jungle running 100. Like I'm trying to figure out, like, are those races more for locals to race, or do people actually like travel? Like do Europeans travel to North America? Do Americans travel like to go to these races? I know people that go to Mexico and run Puerto Vallarta because it's like, to your point, Aaron, like it's a hop, skip, and a jump. Like you're right there. And like for the most part, like Americans traveling in Mexico is a pretty common thing, right? And it's all like around Puerto Vallarta, which is a big resort city, so it's like reasonably safe. So I don't know. I think like when I look at them, I see how they want to have this global footprint, and that's pretty cool. But like at the end of the day, I'm trying to figure out, like, back to like the sustainability. Like, is there enough people in Brazil and Rio? Is there enough ultra runners in Rio to run 100-miler? Like, and make it? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, is there enough demand locally to make money with these races?
So you think you'd be surprised that
totally
when you look at the calendar, the US has the smallest UTMB events because of permitting issue and stuff.
Yeah, that's land use though. Like
I know, but nonetheless, right? I mean, that still means these other events are all really, really big, right?
Yeah.
And many of the other races don't actually have a 100-miler. Like, it's a very US-centric idea that a 100-miler always needs to exist. Like, many of them start off with just 100K, a 50K, and a 20K. And that is sort of something that I think often also works out of sort of growing out of a local sort of community race that already existed. And I think UTMB leaves themselves the option of adding the 100 miler once the event becomes popular, right? So many of the new races don't actually start with the 100 miler immediately part of the offering.
That's how I looked at the South American races, and it was that way. It's like 100K is what you got. That's like the biggest distance to race. I'm just trying to think like obviously, like I live in this little bubble, this like North American ultra running bubble, right? Like, so it's like the idea of like, is there 4,000 people that want to show up and run a UTMB event in South America? Like, I don't know. I know, like, to my point, I met people from Peru when I ran Hellbender. We ran like 7 miles. There was like a dozen of them all running together. All came from Peru to run freaking 100 miler in Western North Carolina. And so it's like, they do exist, obviously, and they can travel to America to race. So it's like I can't see why they wouldn't want to race in their own continent. So
I mean, when you run in Chamonix, you'd be surprised how many international people are there that are not just Europeans and North Americans,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
But I think where that takes me is connecting it back to the outside piece in some respect, and that is, I think these events, they will only succeed if you have people locally on the ground who can be committed to be the stewards of these events. I think Canyons is doing a good enough job because Jazz is still there, being the race director of this event. He was there before and he is still there. And I think this is perhaps something that UTMB is wrestling with. I would be wrestling with if I would be in a position. It's like, how do you expand? How do you instill the consistency of the safety and the branding and everything that we want in those events while still maintaining that local presence that is ultimately required to put on an event? I mean, I've talked with Chrissy, who ran Tarawera, to bring it back to one of our earlier topics, and she was saying, right, where do you get these volunteers from? These races still need volunteers at all the aid stations and in many other places. Well, if a corporation just comes in, helicopters in, they won't have anybody to show up. And the Olympics can do this once every 4 years because it's literally never again for a city. But an annual event, bringing volunteers out, you need somebody local who can really believe in the UTMB product and can really believe in making this product work in their community. I think these people are harder to find. And just like in an outside thing, if you lay off all the editors, if you lay off all the good writers, if you lay off the people,
what's left?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You just can't run this off of AI and bullshit, right? I mean, you need people who love the idea of putting on a race, and for that, you need really, really good partnerships.
Well, I mean, I don't want to bring it back to a tech billionaire, but isn't Elon working on making some robot assistants for all of us? So, like, in the future, will we just go to these UTMB races and we'll be served at the aid stations by an AI robot?
That's going to trigger him.
Well, if it results in them having enough water at aid stations and not running out, then maybe it's a good thing.
You were going to say something, Aaron.
I think it's a good point, because logistically you have to have a lot more local community understanding of the trails. You can't just fly in, stick on an event. If you're putting on an Ironman event and you're working with the city, there's road closures, there's part of the bay or whatever that's closed off for the swim. Logistically, that might seem a lot more difficult, but it's probably not got as many weird variables. Like if you just think about marking a 100-mile course in trails that maybe there isn't normally a 100-mile race there because it's previously just had 100K. I think that's why they take on the events and then they build it out to add the miler in. And touching on the point about participation in South America, there's actually quite a big ultra and trail running scene in Argentina, and they have some great races. Thinking of, like, there's obviously the Patagonia Trail Run or something, but then there's that other one, La Mission, which is meant to be like an amazing event. I met quite a few Argentine runners, at Bigfoot 200, and they just raved about that event. So for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been seeing content from them at these go-to events every year. I'm not quite sure about Brazil, but you know why? Because I don't know any Brazilian trail runners, so I don't have any connect into the local scene there. But as you say, Mathias, it has to.
Yeah, Argentina, the UTMB event in 2024 had 3,500 racers across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different distances, from an 11K to 125K.
Okay. Oh, they're really milking it out there, aren't they?
Well,
That's like the teenager race or something. So let's just expand upon this and maybe bring it full circle a little bit. World Trail Majors announced some new races for this year, and I think these were quality events. And touching again on the earlier subject of flying to events and thinking back to the UTWT and my entry into the sport, I used that UTWT as an opportunity to learn of these events in these other countries. And then I heard Jamil Corey on another podcast, I forget which one and I forget when, but he was saying that he signed up Black Canyon 100K to be part of the World Trail Majors in case it lost golden ticket status, because it was an opportunity to attract a certain number of people and keep some sort of level of prestige. So how long and how possible do you think it would be or take for Jamil Curry to have a by UTMB event?
Interesting.
Let me ask you this one question and then we'll spin it out from there. Are we all in agreement that he must have been approached?
100%.
I mean, he's got the biggest inventory in North America and he's able to put on events with thousands of people. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of slid a check over for so how do you feel about Javelina? How do you, I'm just saying, it's like you can say no and it's easy to say no because there's values involved here, but I wouldn't be surprised when Ironman had all that money to deploy if they weren't approaching Jamil in a major way. I bet he had to please stop emailing me, right? Please stop contacting me, right? I'm not selling my races kind of thing. Mathias, am I crazy? What do you mean? No. The guy puts on 50, Aravaipa puts on 53 of their own events every single year.
No, he's too smart. He didn't say, don't approach me. I think he had conversations.
No. I'm not saying he didn't have conversations. What I'm saying is when he actually said no, I imagine they came back to him multiple times until he was basically no, seriously. When I say no, I mean, he obviously didn't say yes. I'm not saying he straight said no right off the rip. I bet he had all kinds. I bet there was too many conversations. I bet there were so many conversations. He was like, gosh, can someone auto forward all these emails to someone else in my company to deal with for me? Because I don't want to deal with them anymore, So anyway.
But some of the Aravaipa races don't fit the normal model. If you think about the Javelina race, that shouldn't ever be by UTMB. It's 20-mile desert loops with no vert. UTMB, what does it stand for? Forget about the Mont Blanc.
Desert Rats is a flat race in the desert too.
Is it flat?
It's not. I mean, it ain't it doesn't
it's
have
not 30. A Javelina?
No, it's not a Javelina, but it doesn't have 30,000 feet of vert either. Or 20, you know what I mean? It's not.
I think the loops at Javelina is more worrisome than the flatness.
Yeah, I think you're. Yeah, I can get behind that.
Jamil should be trying to sell him something like a cold water rumble or something.
Here is what I think. I'd be curious to see if UTMB is going to make some adjustments in the next couple years in their stone system, right? They obviously had some models when they announced the system in trying to figure out how was this shake out? What would the ultimate sort of lottery requirements going to be for the average person? How many years is it going to be for somebody to actually make it in? And I think they're going to play this out for a couple of years to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years they're making adjustments that there might launch either the stones are going to split and the way they're being accumulated. That would be more of a runner sort of effect, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point down the line they're going to launch especially if they feel like people are not acquiring enough stones for the lottery to be exciting. If they wouldn't be sort of launching a secondary model of races where you might get a stone, but it's not a UTMB event type deal, I wouldn't be surprised at some point in time, because the thing with Jamil is he doesn't want to give up his races, but he, especially here in North America, Ironman wants to own these events. So 2-3 years from now, when the system has established itself, wouldn't be surprised if there is a model that becomes advantageous for Jamil to say this is still an Arepa event, but you can run this and you can get it. Not the full stones like the real events.
What about
That's
a
my
sponsor?
theory.
What about like a sponsored buy at that point, and then they just throw the stones in? Because I just, to be honest, like, it's an interesting question to ponder, Aaron, but just like I don't see it happening, because the way I see Jamil is like quietly eating. It's like he's a world eater. Like he's just quietly like taking over he's quietly taking over the US market. And everyone is like here for it. So like it's kind of this like still a David and Goliath thing, because like the scale that UTMB is operating at is so much bigger. Like some of Jamil's races are like 100 people, 200 people. Like he doesn't, like every single race that UTMB puts on has 1,000+ people in it, or they wouldn't put it on because there's not money for them to do it. So like it's still like it's interesting, but like I think there's like people on both sides of the coin with this, when as far as like Jamil, but they really only have like Arevipa has like 2, maybe 3, they have 3 marquee events. They have Cocodona, they have Black Canyon, and they have Javelina. And like those are the events that they get to print money at. Everything else is like very local focused, small turnout events comparatively to those other events. So I don't know. It's interesting. I couldn't say there's not a world that there's in the metaverse. There's not a world that I see like, that maybe in some alternate reality where Spider-Man doesn't wear red and blue, he like wears all black or something, like that exists. But
that place exists.
There you go. It's interesting. I got my head turning. Just so you know, Aaron, the 100K Desert Rats has 2,000 meters of gain.
That's perfectly fine.
That's flat. 6,000 feet and 100K is flat. So anyway,
yeah, but the like, if you're getting a couple of thousand meters, it's something. Tarawera is less than 3,000 meters. I think it's 2,000 something meters over 100K. So
yeah,
also
okay.
Not a mountain race.
Yeah.
Javelina.
Not flat loops in the desert. Yeah, I get it. It's like I think it's 6,000 total for the 100-miler.
Yeah. Flat. Matthias, close this one out so we can move on.
I don't know. I just think that the stones work pretty well for them. I think the index races are not working well for them. And so I think these index races that are independently run, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to be tweaking something in the near future.
Go back to the original model worked really well for them, to be honest with you.
That was the original model.
The one where if you're a race, you could just apply to get points toward your UTMB score. Like
that was
it's
it.
Like, yeah, okay. The intro model. I thought it worked well. Like
the index
they created it.
I think the index actually works really well too for race directors. I mean, I get people asking if Beast of Big Creek is going to be an index race because they want the index because they have the stones already and they don't want to travel. I think it's not marketed well enough, and it's completely free for race directors to participate in. But I don't know if, I mean, I can only speak of North American race director. I think there's such a apathy towards being part of something else that race directors are not signing up for it. And I think UTMB has to incentivize this almost even more. I mean, they already incentivized this as much as they could. ITRA was paid for. You actually, race director, you actually had to pay money to be part of that system every year, and UTMB is now completely free.
It wasn't a lot of money, but you're right. You still
It
had
was
to
like
pay.
€100 a year.
But for each race, right? So if you were race director with 15 races, that did add up, right? But UTMB made this even cheaper. That's my thing. The incentive, the way they optimized it is that UTMB decided that being part of the index thing would be completely free. And even then, race directors are not really participating in it. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if UTMB wants to have more racers be part of their system and to get more people into the lottery and eligible if they're going to be tweaking that system 2-3 years from now.
They would have more people interested in it, but they lost trust because they created the ITRA system. They created ITRA, they funded it, and then they basically pulled the money whenever they wanted to go their own route.
And then they threw rocks at it, basically.
Then they've modified the ITRA scoring system for the UTMB index system and given preferential rating by UTMB races. So people are reluctant to get on board with what they're doing now, and I think that might be something that goes away with time. But look, let's move on from this, and the last thing on the docket. Don't we always love talking about athlete contracts? I mean, I don't have a clue if people like listening to it, but I sure as hell like talking about it. But contract season's coming to an end, I think. We've got a couple more probably dropping in a few weeks. Sabrina Stanley is one that comes to mind. Wonder where she's going to end up. But like, let's not spend all day on this, but I'll throw out a couple and then we can chat about them. I thought Brooks had an interesting way to do the announcement. They did a collaboration with Free Trail. It was just a reel, and basically Debo did their announcement for them in a collaboration post. A little bit, I mean, it was kind of nice, but as soon as I heard, it's your boy Debo, what's up, Free Trail fam, I completely switched off because I thought it was like an advert for ketones or something. And then it was only whenever I saw, it's in collaboration with Brooks, that it was actually an athlete announcement. It also wasn't that interesting because it was, let's say, they weren't the most high-profile, well-known names that they were announcing. But all in all, it wasn't a bad approach. Then we had the Hoka announcement, or one of the Hoka announcements. Let's touch on both of them. First off, Francesco Pupi, and the most drawn-out announcement ever, where he created his own hashtag. What was it? Questions. I don't know. It's just fucking terrible. It should have had need attention. Hashtag need attention. Should have been what he used. But that event essentially got leaked at an influencer camp in the Alps, and I knew about it. I was trying to leak it, but I didn't want to make it public without his say so. So I had said to him, look, dude, there's an undercurrent of people that know about this. When are you announcing it? Because I'm putting it out there. And he's like, please don't put it out before Wednesday. I'm like, okay, let's agree a time and I'll hold back and let you do your thing, and then I'll put it out. And honestly, 2 days before that, it was freaking everywhere. It was all over the Trail Talk WhatsApp. And I messaged him, I was like, Francesco, the floodgates are open, dude. I'm putting this out tonight. Get ahead of it if you want to get ahead of it. So I think that was a complete flop because it was just drawn out so much. And then the other one, which was the women who fly, which I thought was a really creative way of doing it. It was kind of fun. They kind of videoed the FaceTime call, and it was a collaboration between the athletes, which is a great way of just extending the reach of it. It had Hoka and it had 5, I think, female athletes as collaborators. So just the combined social media reach on that would be just probably 3 or 4x of what it would normally be. Let's kick off with Brooks. Troy, we're coming to you for a hot take. Let's hear it.
Honestly, I missed this. We talked about it and I was like, what happened? And you're like, it was a Free Trail collab. And I'm like a member of the community. And I'm just like, yeah, I totally
You're part
missed
of the
that.
Free Trail Network,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah. My podcast is on the Free Trail Network. I missed this. I did not get the memo. Let's just say that. Completely did not get the memo. And I think it is interesting though, because to me, it just shows, I'm like Dylan and Harmony, what they've been building over the last couple of years, like it's like they're starting to get to a point where they have the kind of reach that a brand will reach out to them and say, hey, can we do a collaboration so we can get more reach, right? Like, because that's all this is, right? It's kind of like, hey, we want to get more eyeballs on this. Dylan talks a lot about, I mean, he spent a lot of time in the offseason talking about contract negotiations. It's kind of like the only thing we have to talk about in media in the offseason for the most part, except for like the spine race. And that was a lot of fun, honestly. I enjoyed watching Dots this year. Great job. And I enjoyed following along on Aaron's stories because it was pretty epic. But like, other than that, like, we have nothing to talk about. So I think it's just nice to see. I imagine it's a little there's a little edification that happens there. I completely missed it. I like 100, and it's like so sad that I'm saying that, but I completely missed it that actually went down on social media. So that's,
Matthias, before you come in on this, I just want to interject at this point and note that last year the collaboration was Brooks and the Utah official Singletrack podcast, but this year they chose to collab with Free Trail for that announcement.
I can talk about that because last year that podcast, that Brooks was that podcast's official footwear sponsor, and now they're no longer.
I don't think they were the official footwear sponsor of the podcast. They just had project work involved.
There were many ad reads for the Cascadia 12 or 15 or 36 or whatever number they're on with that shoe. So I don't know, like, yeah, but yeah, it's interesting.
Let's hear it.
I think that there's something interesting there, and that is that, and I've been trying to write about this on electric cable car for a few years. I think trail running has, especially the latest iteration of the following of the individual athlete, has really grown alongside of Instagram. And as Instagram's sort of algorithm has changed and the sport is becoming more professional, I think that there is sort of a little bit more of an effort being made rather than like, hey, yeah, we'll sponsor you. Just throw something to your community because you have a lot of followers and that's going to be good enough and give us enough reach. I think there's a little bit more of an effort being made to say, who can we collaborate with? Because our individual posts are not getting the reach anymore. And I think there's more athlete management happening and more athlete or brand marketing on behalf of the athlete. And I think as that Instagram model is sort of falling apart for the influencers, the reach isn't there anymore. I think brands are sort of starting to think about media partnerships in a little bit in a different way than just post something on social. It's going to be good enough. And so I think over the last couple of years, we've grown used to this idea of following our favorite athletes and seeing what they're doing. We're cheering for them. Hey, you got a new contract. Hey, you're moving up in the world, right? I mean, we love seeing people doing well and succeeding. And so I think we're excited about these athletes' announcements in general. But I think how Brooks is trying to do it now, there's a lot of attention and a lot of thought put into how do we present a team. It's not just, here's a pair of shoes, post about it 3 times a month on social. I think there's more concerted effort made in presenting the brand. And so on one side, it's a level of professionalization of the sport. And on the other side, I think it's also a sign that normal influencer reach is coming to a close for Instagram.
I don't necessarily agree with some of that. I do think that you can come in a minute. I do think that the reach thing changed around a year ago, and I was actually just looking into this earlier on this week. There was a drop off, and kind of viewer reach dropped by about 60%, and then there was a whole relearning of how to work the algo. And my kind of take on it is basically you don't get junk reach. Like, if you could make a reel last year and, it was just whatever it was just a half decent reel, a decent reel, and it would get, 10,000 views. By spring, that same reel would have got 3,000 views. You can get back to 10,000 views on that same type of reel, but you have to work it. You have to understand the mechanisms of how it works. And I actually think the algorithm on Instagram is more authentic than it used to be. So you kind of, I just think it used to give away junk views in the past. So I don't know how that's going to come together with the talk that they're going to have AI enabled views and commenting, if anyone has seen this. But that's a whole different world, and I don't think we'll go down that route.
They rolled back hard on that, but it's coming for sure. So, yeah.
We're now employing AI for the dopamine hit. Troy, take it away.
Well, my point when Mathias made his point, I was like, here comes the run influencer, right? So, like, of course, you would have a different take on that, and I think you're spot on with where the reach is. But going to like, I think it's just I think what TORQ did reshaped the mold in a sense, and like how they really came about building a team over the last, like, say 4 or 5 years, and that has started to now influence the way the rest of the quote unquote teams are operating. Now, not everyone is in this, like, all tides lift, the tide lifts all boats kind of thing, and like all for the team kind of mentality that TORQ is built around their core athletes and their athletes in general. But I think that, like, to Mathias's point, like, it's not just about like, oh, you're on the team now. It's like, it's about like, how can we collaborate together? How can we expand the reach? How can the runners who are on the team work together? And, at the end of the day, like, I think it's interesting because, going back to even the prize money conversation, like, everyone's just beholden to these brands at this point. And it starts to get a little interesting because every 3 years you're going to have, for the lack of it, for the most part, unless you're like, there's like, what, 5 athletes that don't change, like, everyone just changes hands at the end of the day, right? Over like a 4-year period. And so it's kind of like what the commodity, I hate to say it like this, but there's a commoditization that's happening with the athletes that, if we're not careful, if organizations like the PTRA doesn't come in and like really work toward creating some parity here, like, it's just it's not gonna be great for most athletes when it's all said and done, unless they're working really hard to build their own brand. And there's a handful of them that are doing a really good job of it. But like, if you're just gonna, like, I don't know, it's like interesting. I love the announcements, like, to your point, like the Hoka announcement that they did with the ladies, like, I thought that was amazing. And that was like, when I saw on the agenda, it was like, oh, who did it right? That was one of them that I thought did really well, that I liked. And I was like, oh, there was a lot of thought put into this, and there was a lot of like intentionality on like how we're going to release it. And there wasn't a lot of drama around it. Like, yeah, Corinne kind of strung us along a little bit, but like, she just knew, hey, I can't release this yet. And so she was really good at teasing it, but not like, to go back to the poopy thing, man, dude, like, I was like, I can't even, like, I can't even anymore, and to me, like, at one point, this is a really professional thing when, like, in the NBA, if trades are made, unless it's a blockbuster move, like, everyone's talking about it if a big thing happens, right? But like, if it's not a blockbuster move, it's like a little thing that ticks across the bottom of the game you're watching. And like, that's kind of like, when at some point, like, that's how you really have a professional sport, when it's not like this big hoopla around it, right? And we even have, it's not like there's not trade deadlines in every sport, but like, it's just interesting how like some people approached this year with their announcements, like, I think all good I'm like, why am I spacing? Yeah, I think Hannah's announcement with TORQ was great. It was like a single post. There was like some carousel images, and it was like, hey, welcome to the squad. Same with the way they did, man, Cody Lynn. Like, his announcement was very similar, like, clean, to the point, like, crisp, here we go, let's get to business, right? Like,
but that's how they've done it that's how TORQ have done it. That's their style. And Mathias, I know you love this, but the whole TORQ team vibe and how that team is managed just screams German to me. Like, it's regimented, it's professional, it's structured. And some of the notes I had on the TORQ release was like, the feel of it was no fuss, professional photographs, professionally like released, no tease, No quirky social media aspect, just this person signed with us, they've done a photo shoot, here's the marketing pictures that we need anyway, with them in the gear that we're going to use for the next year while this kit is in season. Moved on. Like, it's not like we're not trying to create some, fantasy drama and interest around this. And I think I kind of like that, but I also thought that the Hoka women's release was very creative as well. I'm just wondering, did that come from one of the ladies rather than coming from Hoka?
We're on the same page, Aaron. I just want to say that. And I think it's interesting because I think Hoka does interesting things, but like I think when you have that opportunity and you're making that kind of signing, like it makes sense to bring everyone together and just make the announcement, right? As opposed to like dragging it out across 5 or 6 people. And you get the reach. Like if you're playing the social media game, they played the social media game to perfection because it was super engaging content with 5 people collaborating, and that's just going to like talking about juicing the algorithm's going to go nuts over that. So
I just want to address what you're saying about the commoditization of the athletes. What is wrong with that? The athlete is a marketing asset and their value is in their athletic ability. And let me group everything else other than that into vibes. Performance and vibes. And people have different levels of one or the other, but that people will be interested in that person and therefore the brand because of their personality or their performance. And that's okay.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think it really comes down to like if you're an athlete and you're not thinking about your personal brand, you're not going to be a professional athlete very long. And I guess that's my point, because you have to like create longevity in this cycle where like every 3 years you're going to be like looking for another shoe contract. So it's like this whole like it's more of this whole like you really have to be thinking past your performance and like obviously how you add value to the brands you're working with, but like how you're building your own personal brand while you have these opportunities to work with these, some of these brands have amazing marketing teams. Like you have to leverage that. You have to be thinking about like, I'm being coached over here to like run faster, and I'm technically being coached over here to like create longevity for myself long past when the speed goes away. I think it's just, there's a couple really good examples in our sport. I just think it's interesting because to our point, you don't have prize money. So if you're an athlete and you're really good, you can't just race yourself to like appearance, you can't race yourself to marathon appearance fees. There's no other way besides working with the brand to support yourself as an athlete in ultra running. So you better be thinking about your own brand and how you can double and triple your value.
Wrap us up here.
I am more fascinated, not so much about what the athlete is doing and how it positions themselves, because I think, again, I'm coming back to the temporary nature and the parallel growth of Instagram. I think we've seen athletes become brands because of Instagram being that model. I do think that the longevity in our sport is going to be different types of partnerships, right? I don't think it's going to be exclusively them being marketing vehicles. I think that there are other forms, and maybe European brands do approach this a little bit different. I like what you've said about TORQ. I hadn't really thought about this, right? Adidas comes in and has a huge purse and thinks, how can we make an impact in this sport where Solomon owns Golden Trail and every hydration pack on someone's back, and Hoka owns every shoe and has the long-term partnership with UTMB that we can't get in, right? They decided to not build another race series or buy another race series or support another race. They said, okay, we using our big purse that we have in a different way and sort of building this team. And I think it's an interesting approach, right? Think of the long-term relationship that Hannes and Rosanna have with Dynafit, right? I mean, they are these long-term athletes with this brand that over here barely anybody knows, but they are on top of the game as athletes, and they are not going anywhere, right? They are long-term tied to these brands. Anton Krupicka is the best example of being long past his prime. And sure, he is more on the influencer side, but he is a long-term partner with La Sportiva.
Vibes, performance.
He built an exceptional brand for himself. He understood the game he was playing, and he's doing it very, very well.
100%, right? But the brand, that's what I'm saying. I'm not really interested so much in what the athletes is doing. I'm more interested about how do these brands sort of develop and continue to support these athletes, because Solomon maybe would have already dropped Anton, wherein La Sportiva is sticking with them, right? Wherein, I mean, if a team would be only interested in top performances, they would have long cycled through somebody like Anton, right? So I think that there are different models where brands can look at athlete partnerships for something other than an influencer marketing asset. And I think while this still works right now, I think we're going to see changes in the future in how brands are supporting these athletes and what they want out of them.
All right. That'll do, guys. I think that's a nice place to end it out. We could hem and haw on that, but yeah, appreciate your opinions on that. And let's close it out before we hit the magic 2 hours and Troy turns into a pumpkin.
It's after midnight here, so like the couple hours of sleep I'm going to get before I got to wake up and go for a run is going to be well needed. So
think about us when you're on the trails. Everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.